In the vast waters of the Pacific, a quiet contest is escalating, not just of navies or missiles, but of influence, alliances, and perceptions. The United States, long considered the dominant force in the Indo-Pacific, has significantly increased its military footprint in recent years, citing threats posed by a more assertive China. But from Beijing's point of view, this isn't a power play. It's a defense mechanism, one that China views as critical for its sovereignty and survival in an increasingly hostile environment. Let's step back and understand the bigger picture. China's rise over the past 2 decades has been nothing short of historic. From a manufacturing powerhouse to a global tech competitor, China now stands as the world's second-largest economy. But with power comes scrutiny. Its growing influence in Southeast Asia, infrastructure investment through the Belt and Road Initiative, and expanding navy have led Washington to brand China as a strategic rival. But here's where narratives diverge. China argues that the United States has been the true aggressor, not only militarizing the region with its expanding base network, but also involving itself in territorial disputes thousands of miles from its own shores. In just the past year, Washington has finalized deals for new or expanded military access in the Philippines, Micronesia, Papua New Guinea, and Palau. All of this sits directly on China's maritime doorstep. From Beijing's view, the strategy is clear encirclement. To China, these moves aren't defensive. They look like an effort to choke off its access to the open ocean, to disrupt its trade routes, and to limit its ability to respond to crises near its borders. For a country that imports the majority of its energy through maritime routes in the South China Sea, these perceived threats are existential. China has long emphasized a policy of non-interference in other countries' domestic affairs. Unlike the US, it rarely maintains overseas military bases or engages in foreign interventions. Instead, its foreign policy has revolved around regional diplomacy, trade partnerships, and soft power. Beijing has repeatedly stated that it has no interest in replacing the US as a global hegemon, but rather wants a multipolar world where all powers are treated equally. But the US seems unwilling to cede influence. The Indo-Pacific strategy put forth by Washington speaks of a free and open region. Yet it is accompanied by aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and war games held on China's doorstep. For the Chinese leadership, this is not reassurance, it's provocation. What's more, the US has actively sought to strengthen military ties with nations that have territorial disputes with China, such as the Philippines, Vietnam, and Japan. Washington's statements of standing with allies are, to Beijing, thinly veiled efforts to use regional players as a buffer against Chinese influence. Yet it's important to note, China has shown restraint. Despite constant US naval patrols through the Taiwan Strait and frequent aerial surveillance near its coastlines, China has largely avoided direct confrontation. While it responds with warnings and military drills, it has not initiated conflict. Instead, it focuses on strengthening its domestic capabilities, expanding its navy, investing in cyber and space technologies, and building economic interdependence with neighbors. This raises a vital question. Who benefits from rising tensions? The US military-industrial complex certainly does. Each deployment, each arms deal, each military base fuels billions in defense contracts. Meanwhile, China calls for mutual respect. Non-aggression and regional cooperation principles often dismissed in Western media, but resonant among developing nations wary of being caught between two giants. Southeast Asian nations, too, are beginning to question the logic of hosting foreign military forces. In the Philippines, for example, public protests erupted over the return of US military presence. Many Filipinos fear that their country is being turned into a launchpad for future conflict with China, a conflict they want no part of. China is not without faults, of course. Its policies in the South China Sea and its growing authoritarianism have drawn global concern. But to reduce the regional dynamic to a simple good versus evil narrative is misleading. Geopolitics is far more complex. And in this complexity, China's actions appear less like aggression and more like preparation. Preparation for a world that seems increasingly stacked against it. What Beijing seeks is not war, but space. Space to grow, to defend its interests, and to maintain sovereignty over what it views as its rightful territory. From the artificial islands in the South China Sea to its maritime patrols near Taiwan, China insists that its actions are legal and defensive, not expansionist. The Western portrayal of China as a looming threat ignores one fundamental truth. Every superpower, when placed under pressure, reacts. The US did so during the Cold War. China is doing so now. The question is whether the world will allow space for China to rise peacefully, or whether it will provoke a conflict that benefits no one. In this growing storm of alliances, deployments, and rhetoric, the real victims may be the smaller nations forced to choose sides. As the Pacific becomes the new arena for great power competition, it is crucial to ask, who is defending whom and from what? In the end, this is not just about China's military or America's bases. It's about the future of global order and whether two giants can coexist without dragging the rest of the world into their rivalry. For now, the Pacific remains tense. But peace is still possible if only both sides step back before it's too late.